The hum of the airplane engines was steady, comforting even. Passengers were halfway through their cross-country flight when the turbulence hit. Mild at first, then violent enough to jolt drinks into laps and send a wave of panic through the cabin. In row 10, a man stirred. His clothes were plain, his hands rough, and his eyes heavy with the exhaustion only single parents know. His name was Tom Bennett, a janitor from Ohio, flying home after attending his son's robotics competition. He'd spent his last savings on the ticket. When the captain's voice came over the speaker, it wasn't the usual calm tone. "Ladies and gentlemen, if there are any combat pilots or flight-trained personnel on board, please press your call button immediately." The words sent a ripple of fear through the cabin. Something was wrong. A flight attendant ran down the aisle, eyes wide. "The captain's co-pilot just collapsed. We need help in the cockpit." Passengers looked around helplessly. A businessman muttered, "Combat pilots? On this flight? What are the odds?" But then, a single call light blinked in row 10. Everyone turned. Tom, the quiet janitor, slowly stood up. His worn sneakers squeaked against the carpet as he lifted his hand. I can help," he said quietly. The flight attendant blinked. "Sir, have you flown before?" Tom nodded once. "F-18 Super Hornets. 2 tours in Afghanistan." The murmurs stopped. The man who had been half asleep moments ago now moved with a calm confidence that silenced everyone. He handed his flannel jacket to the elderly woman beside him, gave her a reassuring smile, and walked toward the cockpit. Inside, chaos. Warning lights flashed, the plane pitched slightly. The captain was pale, sweat running down his temple. "I've lost hydraulic pressure on the right side." The co-pilot fainted. "You said you've flown?" Tom slipped into the co-pilot's seat like he never left it. "Yes, sir. Let's get her steady." His hands danced over the controls, steady, precise, controlled. Years of training that he'd buried under late-night janitorial shifts came alive. The plane leveled. The captain exhaled in disbelief. "You're a janitor, huh?" the captain said, voice shaking between relief and awe. Tom smiled faintly. "Just a dad trying to make rent." When the plane finally landed safely in Denver, the cabin erupted in applause. Passengers cried, hugged, and clapped until their palms stung. The captain made the announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking Mr. Tom Bennett, a combat pilot and an American hero." The man who mopped floors for a living stood in the aisle, embarrassed by the attention. But the truth was shining now. A hero doesn't need a uniform to exist. As he stepped off the plane, a little girl from row 12 ran up and hugged his leg. "Thank you for saving us, mister." He knelt down, eyes soft. "You're welcome, sweetheart. You stay brave, okay?" She grinned, clutching his hand before running back to her mother. Tom walked through the terminal alone, his carry-on over his shoulder. He pulled out his phone, one text notification from his son. "Dad! We won first place! I wish you were here." He smiled through misty eyes. "I'll be home soon, buddy," he whispered. Epilogue. A week later, news outlets ran the headline. "Single dad janitor saves 187 lives mid-flight. Former combat pilot's quiet bravery goes viral." But Tom didn't care about the fame. That night, as he tucked his son into bed, his boy asked, "Dad, were you scared up there?" Tom smiled gently. "A little. But when you're doing something that matters, fear has no place to stay." And for the first time in years, he slept peacefully, not as a janitor, not as a veteran, but as a father who reminded the world that greatness often hides in the quietest hearts. The next morning, the world knew his name. Tom woke up to a knock on his small apartment door. Reporters, cameras, microphones, flashing lights. "Mr. Bennett! How does it feel to be America's newest hero? Sir, is it true you used to fly combat missions? What made you leave the Air Force?" He stood there in his old sweatshirt, blinking against the morning glare. He wasn't used to attention, only the quiet hum of a vacuum cleaner echoing through empty hallways at night. "Ma'am," he said softly to one reporter, "I didn't save anyone. I just did what I was trained to do. But the world saw something more. A single father. A janitor. A man who had been overlooked, until he became the reason hundreds were alive. That week, letters started pouring in. From soldiers. From children. From people who'd lost faith in heroes. One note stood out. It came from the Air Force commander he had once served under. Bennett, we never forgot you. You were the one who always volunteered for the impossible missions, and never asked for credit. We'd like you to come back, not as a pilot, but as an instructor. The next generation could learn from a man like you. Tom sat at the kitchen table, staring at the letter. His son, Jake, peeked over his cereal bowl. Dad, does this mean you can fly again? Tom chuckled, eyes soft. Maybe. But only if you promise to keep. The diner smelled of fresh coffee and fried bacon when Jake Miller walked in that morning. A single dad and a mechanic by trade, Jake wasn't looking for trouble. He just wanted a quiet corner, a cup of coffee, and a moment to catch his breath before heading to the shop. But the silence didn't last. Across the room, a woman in a wheelchair, her leather jacket worn and patched with the unmistakable Hells Angels emblem, was being cornered by two uniformed cops. Their voices weren't loud, but the tone was sharp, condescending, almost mocking. Where'd you steal that jacket, sweetheart? One officer sneered. The woman's face tightened. Her knuckles gripped the wheels of her chair. Jake,